It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendu. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's been a very interesting week as always with Nigeria. I think the Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board has been at the top of the news through the past week with all the controversies surrounding the rescheduled examinations following what we will call the botched situation with at least 6 states with their centers across Nigeria. The registrar of JAMB has come out and had a lot to say, but we'll delve into that a little later on the show. We'll have some guests who will come and help us understand a little more what's happening there and what things look like going forward. Away from that, Mr. President is currently in the Vatican City attending the inauguration of Pope Leo XIV. He will attend the inaugural mass this morning alongside other heads of state and government and royalty across the world. The presidency has touted this as a good sign of, the fact that even if it's a Muslim president and vice, there's a lot of tolerance in Nigeria, trying to counter the narrative and argument about Christians across the country who have had their lives in danger over the last couple of months. We hope some good conversations come out of that. We did see pictures on social media of Mr. President with the Secretary of State of the Vatican City. So yes, a lot of that has been happening, but also inflation figures have been at the top of the news this past week. And we're going to be starting our conversation today with that. And I'm joined now virtually by Seun Awogbele. Thanks a lot for joining me, Seun. How are you doing this afternoon?
Hello, Lucas. It's good to see you again. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. We heard that inflation numbers have dropped to 23.71%. A lot of Nigerians have decided not to bother with a lot of these figures when you hear them. We feel what we feel. People still can't afford things. Most people will tell you things are even more expensive than they were at the start of the year. The NBS had said they were going to rebase the GDP by January. We're in May now. And when people hear rebasing now, they think it's just some technical way of, papering over the cracks. Considering the fact that what people feel is different from these numbers, what should Nigerians feel about these figures that we hear?
Well, I think Nigerians should be excited. For one, you talked about the rebasing. Yes, that's true. The NBS this year, actually last year, started efforts to actually update the calculations for both the consumer price index that measures the inflation and also the GDP. For the GDP, they are essentially trying to account for recent economic activities that have not been captured more recently. The current calculation for both for the GDP is outdated, and then because we've actually had economic activities in some emerging sectors like real estate, like technology, and a couple of other sectors have not been previously captured. But for the CPI, which is inflation, you talked about inflation dropping to about 23% this month. Well, I think that's something to check. But what is quite responsible for this? The major drivers of inflation, they are food and energy prices. When it comes to food, I think that reasonably we can all agree that the price of food has reasonably dropped. In terms of energy prices, both as a result of the impact of the tariff, we can see that the global price of crude has dropped, and then well to lower than $70 per barrel. It's about the $60 per barrel region. So essentially, when the prices drop, the prices of fuel at the stations would equally drop. That's basically that's essentially disproportionate. When the price of international price of crude drops, the price of fuel at the filling stations would equally drop. But so that basically accounts for why you had the reduction in both in inflation. So they are real. They do actually represent the current economic realities. But of course, 23% is still unacceptable. Government still has to do more. We have to be able to provide what we can, what we hit as a nation. So we have to be self-sustaining. When you talk about the Nigeria First initiative, for example. So the things that should drive this Nigeria First initiative are the agriculture and manufacturing. So Nigeria must be able to produce what it eats and must be able to feed our own people. We must even be talking about abundance as a country. we cannot continue to rely on other countries to feed our own country. So those are factors that should guide the Nigeria First initiative. Agriculture, we have to be aggressive on agriculture. States like Niger, I think, are now already doing something in that regard. I think Ogun as well, even Lagos actually. So we must be able to feed our own people. So when we go, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
you wanted to come in?
Just wanted to jump in there because, I mean, we hear all of this, right? And like I said at the start of this, these numbers, these technicalities are great for the image. But what matters most to a lot of people is what they feel, like I said. With all of these figures still, we did see the MBS say that food prices in Nigeria continue to bite hard, with Benue, Ekiti, and Kebbi emerging as the states with the steepest year-on-year increase in food inflation. Now, we live in a country where a large percentage of people's income goes to food. Because, I mean, if you are this poor, you don't even have room for, disposable incomes to do other things. So food is very, very key. And we all know that the North, especially places like Benue State, are key to feeding the nation. Benue State, in its April 2025 consumer price index, Benue State led the food inflation chart with a staggering 51.76 increase in food inflation. And I think that tells the story. I mean, there's a lot of these theories about what insecurity is also doing with that. But all of this still goes back to what the government isn't doing or needs to be doing. Whether we like it or not, these are the facts on ground. Mr. President declared a state of emergency. I remember, I think it was in 2023 when he got into power. I don't know if we've seen any results of that. We hear every day farmers are dying, farms are being closed down. What does that state of emergency then mean?
Oh, well, it just means that government needs to go further and faster, especially with stamping out insecurity. You can't have prosperity without stability and peace. Peace and stability are essential for prosperity. So when you talk about agriculture, farmers are not able to go to farm essentially because of insecurity. So I think government has equally realized this thing. You need to go further and faster to stamp out insecurity. They must wipe out the insurgents and the terrorists and the bandits and the kidnappers who continue to impair our agricultural activities. So, I mean, there's absolutely no point about that. There's no denying that. I think government must equally be on the same page about on the essence of finding a lasting solution to the insecurity challenges, especially in the North Central and in the Northwest and parts of the Northeast region. Is very essential. You can't have economic activities without security and stability and peace.
Fair enough. Let's move on now to, what's happening with politics, because everybody says that we're slowly drifting into a one-party state. I mean, in the past, when we had all of these issues going on, you would find the opposition stepping up, and challenging the status quo of the ruling party and telling Nigerians, oh, vote us back in, we're going to, probably change these policies and blah, blah, blah. We have a situation now where it looks like everybody's running to join this party in power. And the APC, of course, they're going to bask in this. Come on in, we're about 2 years or less even away from elections, the next general elections. A lot of people are saying Nigeria cannot be a one-party state. We're too complex for that, so it's not going to work. But we have a lot of countries, even if they are communist countries, where that happens, and has happened for decades. So it's not particularly impossible. Even across the continent here, we have pretty much de facto one-party state nations across the country. Is it not fair that people should be worried?
Well, I do think that people should, and I think they should not be worried. For one, I don't think Nigeria is going to drift into a one-party state. Well, they are fears, but I don't think that those fears are rife. For one, let's talk about the opposition. I think that the opposition self-sabotaged. You look at the PDP self-sabotaged. As a result of the arrogance and impunity of some individuals within that party. So essentially, the party is emerging. You look at the Labour Party; they are not able to get their acts together. But I do not think that we are going to slide into a one-party state. I think that opposition figures are still trying to group. They are considering whether or not to form into a coalition or to coalesce into a coalition, or what would be the best approach. I think that as a multicultural and multi-ethnic society that Nigeria is, you will continue to have people who do not share the same idea. You will continue to have people who disagree. But essentially, this also speaks to our politics, or the depressing, what I call the depressing nature of our politics. You have a lot of people, a lot of politicians who do not essentially have ideology. And I've always said that you need to have a society where, people must be able to define what they stand for, whether they stand for the right, for the left, or whether or not they are centrist. But you have a society where people don't even stand for anything. So our political parties are essentially platforms for winning elections. Everybody just wants to be on the winning side. And I mean, understandably so. But then it then denies us of the sort of robust debate that we should have. It denies us of the sort of vibrant political system or political society that we should have, because it should be a contestation of ideas. But currently, I do not know whether or not the opposition is actually trying to canvass any idea. Because as it stands, they are still trying to put their political parties in order. But I also should admit that it's always difficult to be in opposition within the climate that we have. For example, I'll give you an example of the UK. Even opposition parties still get some level of funding from the state. But in our own case, political parties are expected to fund themselves directly, either through membership or by raising funds from nomination. You see nomination funds going to as high as 100 million, and I mean, so essentially, I think that if we demonetize our political process in some sense, you can then, and including the incentives that is involved, you can then tell the people who are going into it for actual and true service. But it also speaks to the sort of fundamental and radical changes that we need in the country. But I do not think Nigeria is going to slide into a one-party state. I do think that the opposition might get itself together, and they will definitely present one united front going to 2027. But then it is now, I mean, whether or not they do present a formidable front is a different thing, because the incumbent is also trying to consolidate. So the incumbent's ability to consolidate and his sagacity, I mean the President Tinubu's sagacity and his political prowess to be able to mobilize and to galvanize people should not be seen as a threat to the opposition, because the opposition have got their own role, and they must also do their own work. If the opposition is able to get itself together, for example, when 2025. And you cannot tell who's going to be the candidate of opposition, because at this point you think that the opposition should already be rallying around a certain candidate, but they cannot even agree on who should be the candidate of opposition. So these are the issues. So I personally don't think Nigeria is going to slide into a one-party state.
I mean, I hear you, but last Sunday, actually, we had this conversation almost extensively as well on the show, talking about, who are these people that are going to lead this thing. I mean, we've seen former Governor Nasir El-Rufai and former Governor Peter Obi take pictures. Nobody knows what that means. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar seems to be quiet for now. I don't know where he stands. We also did mention former President Goodluck Jonathan and former Senate President Bukola Saraki on the show last week. Finish that up on Monday, we see newspaper headlines saying that the former First Lady is saying that they are going to be supporting the current president. We see on the other side that former Senate President Saraki is leading a PDP reconciliation thing, which has now started facing its own storms because the Southeast governors have a different candidate for national secretary from what the party is proposing. So it really does feel that way. I mean, President Jonathan has not said anything, but he also hasn't debunked what his wife has said. And this is probably the largest figure of the PDP. He's the only former president who's still, I think, a member of the party right now who's there. I mean, all signs point to one thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think quite respectfully, I think that the political consensus at this time is to actually have a southern candidate, and it is unfortunate that that's where we found ourselves, the rotation from north to south. But I think that at the moment it gives us some level of balance. In the medium and the long term, I would not advocate for it. I do think that people should be able to contest from whatever part of the country that they are from. But at the moment, I think the consensus is that the opposition should field a southern candidate as well to take on the incumbent. And the opposition they're not short of quality people from the south. You just mentioned a couple of names who can actually, who definitely can rise up. They can rise to the occasion. But then it now speaks to, one, the sincerity of our opposition leaders, and whether or not some persons like, pardon me to mention them, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is able to assume the role of a statesman at this time. I'm also one of the people who do believe that Alhaji Atiku Abubakar should actually step down for a southern candidate and possibly a much younger candidate. I think that is at this time. I personally even think that in some of the previous election, he was probably the most prepared in terms of governance, but at this time, I don't think that the calculations and including the trend. I also don't think it's quite popular among young people. It would be delusional to think that he can excite the opposition. He can't. So I think that the major opposition figure, which is Ajab, should actually step down and back a much younger candidate. They have candidates in the south who definitely can. Who can try? They can definitely try to take on the opposition. They can try to take on the incumbent. But I think that as soon as the earlier the opposition is able to get itself together, the better for the opposition.
All right. Let's quickly just wrap it up now with this bill that's been presented in the National Assembly about voting becoming compulsory. A lot of Nigerians are wondering what that means. I mean, we're hearing 6 months in jail or fines or something. And I know I'd heard about, I think, particularly Australia, where that is the case. That's the one country everybody always talks about, where you are compelled to vote or compelled to vote. You can't sit out on voting days. Most other countries, even if they have it as a law, don't necessarily enforce it. I know there are places where, I think it's in Brazil, I'm not sure, where voting is compulsory for literate voters. I don't know what that means. So what do you think of this? Does this help turnout? Is there, as with most cases in Nigeria, a cover for something else that we may figure out at some point? What does this mean? And do you think it's a good idea?
No, absolutely not. I'm sorry, but I think the idea is completely is completely insane. I'm sorry. I think that I think that politics essentially runs on public trust. Politics runs on trust. The truth is that in Nigeria, that trust has been broken, and political leaders need to fix that trust. And trying, methods that coerce people, trying to get people to compel voting and mandate them to vote is not going to repair the trust. What will repair the trust is the ability of the political elites to deliver on democratic dividends, to be able to deliver prosperity to the people, provide jobs for the people, get economic growth, and ensure that this growth actually trickle down to every part of the country, and people's living standards improve. Their living conditions they are able to improve their living condition. When you do this, people are naturally excited to vote. And I said this, and I said this on the backdrop of the fact that, yes, while voting is a right, but you cannot compel people. They can choose to vote or not to vote. What you see is that when you have candidates that excite people on the ballot, people are going to come out to vote. Like you saw in 2023, people would come out to vote. You need candidates that excite the population. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So rather than try to compel people to vote, a bill which I think is going to be thrown out anyway, I think that what the political elite should be concerned about, what they should focus on, is how to repair the broken public trust.
Okay. Thank you very, very much for your contributions. Very well said there. I mean, with the population of the country and what we see as the voter turnout with each election cycle, it makes you wonder, where that trust is going to come from. But thanks a lot for your insights today. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about JAMB and its many issues. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the show. Now, the Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board has been in the news in the past week with the Registrar, Professor Ishak Oloyede, making the headlines on the day he apparently broke down in tears and taking responsibility for basically, I don't even know what word to use, mishandling hundreds of thousands of Nigerians' exams and results across 6 states, 5 of them in the Southeast and Lagos State. We're going to try and delve into the people who are directly affected by this. I'm joined now by Mario Chukwuma, who's a student. Thanks for being here today. Thank you. And of course, Olanrewaju Oniyitan, who's Executive Director, Seed Care and Support Foundation. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with you, Mario. Where did you write the exams, first of all?
The first one or the second one?
The first one.
The first one, I wrote it at Palm Grove at an open university. That's where I wrote it as. Yeah.
Okay. Is this your first JAMB?
No, this isn't.
When did you write one first?
My very first JAMB was 2 years ago.
Okay.
When I was 16.
Okay.
I took it. I took one last year. I didn't get admission, so here I am.
What did you score last year?
I got 240.
240.
Yeah.
And the first one this year, you scored what?
157.
157. So when you saw that, did it make you feel, okay, maybe I didn't do well, or did you know something was wrong instantly?
At first, what first hit you is emotions just hit you. Depression, everything, it just hits you one time. I was like, I've disappointed myself, my dad. All the effort I've put was wrong because I got 157. My best subject is math, and I got 40 in math. So I was like, last year I just won best in math in my school, and I'm here scoring 40. It wasn't adding up.
Yeah, it didn't make sense.
Yeah, it didn't make sense. Then I got to my tutorial group. I go to a tutorial, and then I'm seeing people better than me scoring 157. So I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
So I knew something was wrong. I knew something was wrong.
So when you heard that, and your center was one of those that were affected.
Yeah, it was.
Where were you when you heard that, and did you understand? Because a lot of Nigerians have, maybe let me use the word, mixed reactions to what the registrar has done. People say, oh, it's the first time we're seeing a Nigerian take responsibility. But there are others who say, well, of course he should take responsibility. Hundreds of thousands of people are affected by this. Unfortunately, we even have a death in this. Did you feel better about that, or was it something that made you angry?
100%, I felt better that he took responsibility for what he did. Because you can't just go ahead and just say, oh, everyone is a failure. Because the numbers were too much. Out of 1.9, 1.7 failed. So I'm like, what is going on? So when I saw that we were going to resit, I was actually happy. But what I wasn't really too happy about was the timing. Because we had the news on Thursday. No, we had the news on Wednesday. On Thursday, they said reprint. That day, I woke up like 6. I'm now saying reprint. I'm like, okay, reprint. Then I checked the reprint, and I'm having an exam the next day. And I wrote exam in Bega, so I'm like, what is going on? I stayed with my grandma in Onike, so I'm like, what is going on? It's so crazy, and I have to get ready. I need to be prepared, and I'm writing exam the next day. So it's commendable for what he did, that he came out and he took responsibility. But the timing it wasn't just okay.
Let me come to you, because a lot of these issues are, you know, like he said, it was too much happening. We have this sudden revelation finally, your acceptance, you know, that this was mishandled. And I think another thing that troubled a lot of people was 2 days, 48 hours basically was the notice. We don't even know if everybody got this information. People in rural areas who might not be on social media, who might not be watching television, who probably might not have heard that this happened. The timing of this. And like I said, we did have someone who lost their life as a result of, you know, this entire situation. You work in the education space. Yeah. You work with a lot of young people. How has this whole thing felt to you?
First, my heart goes to the family of the girl that lost her life because of this. I really feel this. I understand how young people feel. And like you've mentioned, there are quite a number of people, even in Lagos, in low-income communities, that didn't get this information that we had to be putting out so that the children can go back and, you know, get this. The timing was so short. He is even lucky. He had time to, you know, get ready for the exams. Those that are currently in school were writing WAEC on that day. Some had papers at 8 a.m. and they had to write JAMB at 6:30 a.m. that same day. So it was, I don't know why we were rushing, you know.
So that happened, because, sorry to cut you, because I thought I heard them say, oh, JAMB had discussed with WAEC, so they were going to have arrangements where things don't clash. So they still clashed?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you know, there was scrambling up and down. Some people already had scheduled WAEC at 8 o'clock, because it was JAMB that was rescheduling all of these things. And so there was a lot of confusion. People were confused. They didn't know what to do. Parents had already planned things they had to do. We had parents from low-income communities who were hustling, and their children had exam at 6:30 a.m. They had to leave their place of work. These parents earn daily pay to take these young children to faraway centers to go and write these exams because they couldn't leave them alone. They had to wake up at 4, you know, to get to the center, and, you know, you can't leave a teenager to go on a bus and start heading to their center before 6:30 a.m. So it was a lot of issues. It was a lot of challenges, and, you know, the information didn't reach a lot of people, and some children opted not to even rewrite. I mean, it is real trauma. Most times we adults were so beating, we're used to this system. Oh, I wrote JAMB 6 times, it's not a problem. But it's abnormal, it's not normal. So because we are broken doesn't mean our children should be broken. So we need to ensure that we're looking at how our decisions impact our children today so that they can thrive and succeed.
That's very, very pointed there, because, I mean, there's been so many stories, we don't know what's true or not, about how long ago JAMB even figured this out or identified this problem, and how long it took them to come out and say something. You know, the young girl who passed away, Faith Opeshishi, I think is her name, scored 146 over 400. I mean, that could have been prevented if maybe this was said earlier. Sorry, this has been figured out. We don't know what's true or not. Hopefully, we do actually have an investigation into things. The second exam you went to, how did that go this time? I was seeing stories about technical failures, things not working, because, I mean, I wrote JAMB when we were writing the paper. I know things are computerized now, so things are different. What was the second situation like?
The second situation, I had the exams by 2 p.m., okay? The normal processes of logging in, everything, it went well. But during my own exam, personal exams, a girl beside me, she touched one of the cables, she touched it, so 7 of us had server issues. Wow. So 7 of us got disconnected. So they said, calm down, don't worry, we'll fix it. We said, no problem. So they logged us out, so we were back to the homepage of writing your number. So they said, don't worry, your time isn't counting. That was cool. While I was writing, we got towards the end, 10 minutes to the end of my exam, it just cut. They said that we should submit and we should go home. I'm like...
So you were not giving that time?
I wasn't giving any time. At least you people saw me while we were writing that something happened.
What happened.
And 10 minutes more, I didn't answer half of my physics questions this second time. I'm like, what is going to happen now? But I spoke to one of them, one of the coordinators, and I asked her, Ma, look what happened, you were here. Can something go on about this? And she said, she smiled and she said, don't worry, you'll be fine.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
I don't know, this isn't funny, but it's also just mind-boggling. You talked a lot about, you know, people in all of these rural areas, people who even decided not to come back for it. How do parents handle situations like this now, even teachers? You know, people might be going, God forbid, for the 3rd or 4th time because of this entire situation. As a parent, how do you handle the child going through this? I
mean, I have a lot of friends, I have a lot of parents in the schools that we work with that do not even understand how to deal with this. You know, a lot of times we adults say, oh, this is how children will build resilience. But we don't. Resilience is when you face challenges that are natural and normal, not when the system is the one putting these abnormal challenges in, you know, for you to start to, you know, deal with. Parents are dealing with a lot of children that are tired, a lot of children that are frustrated, a lot of children that are doing a lot of things to cope with this kind of situation. And it's not, you know, you don't think you would have to go through this as a parent. My children are 16. I have a set of twins that are 16, and they haven't written JAMB, but I'm fearful about, you know, the situation. I wrote JAMB a couple of times. I passed every single year, but I couldn't get into school because one school will say, oh, you didn't pick us as first choice or something, and you have to, you know, just deal with it. And I knew how I dealt with it because as a young girl at that time, it wasn't funny that you passed WAEC at a sitting. You know, you did JAMB, you're actually passing, but you can't even get into school. And the question on my mind is, if he did it the first time and he got a certain score, and he did it the second time and he got a lower score, which one would JAMB even pick? You know, these are some of the questions on parents' mind that they've shared with me. Like, what would really happen? What's the situation? How is government going to deal with the trauma that they're causing children? These children are not just JAMB numbers. They are human beings. They are our future, that we need to be able to deal with their emotions and how, you know, they see our country. We want patriotic Nigerians, but their gateway, JAMB is now a gateway to their future. And we're toying with their future by doing all of this. 2
things I wanted to ask you, because one thing came up at the time when the first exam was being written about the time. This 6:30 a.m. was so controversial. Why have 16, 15-year-olds or whatever the age is going to an exam for 6:30, which means they have to wake up at what, 4?
4.
It depends on where you live. If you're one of those that live in a place where you have to trek for miles because there's no public transportation, when then do you start your day? By the time the exam starts, are you mentally even okay to write this exam. There's that part. Then the second thing is what you brought up about writing exams and not getting into school. There's been the argument about this post-JAMB that universities do anyways. If you're going to make people write your own specific, exams for your university, is JAMB still relevant?
So there are even quite a number of things to unpack with that question. So is JAMB even still relevant? JAMB, number one, the validity of JAMB. Because if I'm going to do post-UTME,
yes,
and JAMB is valid just for 1 year, it means I have to continually write JAMB every year if I have to go into a university and I'm not taking. Then number two, the post-UTME calculation for the universities, they look at an aggregation of WAEC, JAMB, and their exam. That is what is triggering a lot of malpractice in WAEC, because if you don't score all A's, you're already at a disadvantage when they start to start to calculate the aggregates. So this is causing a lot of things. If I'm going to do post-UTME, why on earth am I writing JAMB every year? Or why is JAMB even existing? JAMB can just be a policymaker, coordinator, whatever they decide to do if they want to still be relevant. But if I still have to have 3 things before I can get into a tertiary institution, what are we saying about the low-income families in Nigeria? Are we saying they shouldn't go to university? Or we're trying to look for a way to say we don't have enough spaces in our university? What can we use to reduce the number? I mean, is this the birth control of education, to say we don't want this number of children to enter into university, so we create a lot of barriers for them not to get there? Because that's what it's telling us. It's not saying we're ready to take our children to go into tertiary institutions. It's saying we need to reduce the number because we've not made provision for tertiary education, because there's not a lot of public universities for the poor. I mean, private universities are springing up, middle and high class families can take their children there. But what about the average Nigerian? What about the poor? How would they go to tertiary institutions if these barriers are in place?
Do you still have faith in JAMB? I mean, you said you were best in math. You have your WAEC, I believe, on NECO, or whatever it is.
Both.
You wrote JAMB the first time. You scored pretty good, didn't get into school. Second time now this has happened. Third time you've also had some drama, but you've not seen the results yet. Do you still feel confident, with the system?
Actually, let me have a moment to think.
Yeah.
I believe in JAMB. I still believe in JAMB because I believe in Nigeria. So when something like this happens, is to review what has happened and say, how do we move forward? Because we can't keep looking at, this, and state the problems. Because the problem now is that everybody is just stating problems of this and this. What is the way to move forward? So the way to move forward is that we need to review what is going on, transparency, and most of these things that we talk about.
Yeah.
Then another issue I would like to bring up is the issue of the questioning system. In JAMB, they say that the computer shuffles a list of questions and gives you. There's no problem. But in a scenario where you have a bulky scheme of work, and then they give you, out of 100% of that, they give you 20%, and you read 80%. So that is another issue that I'm having, because in the first one that I wrote before the receipt, in my physics, I barely read electricity. It was something that I barely read. The scheme of work is very large. So I barely read electricity. I was like, nah, it can't really come out. In your mind, you're like, yeah. But then in the exam, it was just electricity. I was like, what is going on? What is going on? So I think that too needs to be looked at, because students go through hell to write this exam. I know people that went 7 months straight, just booked, no life, no nothing. So I want to just pass this JAMB. I just want to pass this JAMB. Please.
Is there a JAMB scheme of work?
Yeah, there's a JAMB scheme of work.
Separate from that's given to students, so you just have to figure it out?
It's kind of like almost the same thing, JAMB, WAEC, NECO.
Okay.
So JAMB zone is, they have their own, WAEC have their own. But it's just that it's so bulky, and then you expect at least 1 or 2 from each place. But out of 40 questions, you can see 30 of one topic. And someone goes ahead and they pass JAMB, and that's how it is. But I think that really needs to be reviewed too.
What schools are you trying to get into?
Federal universities, UNILAG.
Okay, all federal universities?
UNILAG, that's number 1 that I'm looking forward to.
Do you feel, with your exams you've written now, do you feel like you would hit the same scores or better than your score last year? Or are you worried?
I'm worried I didn't complete
because you didn't
the
complete.
exam. Yeah, but I have faith in my other 3 subjects in that. That's it. But if it doesn't hit, well, we look at other things, getting old.
What are the things? You want to be an artist?
Other ways of getting into university.
Okay, getting into university. I mean, there are options, but like she said, a lot of them might not be reachable for a lot of people in their financial situation. Sometimes it's distance. A school might offer you an admission. Nigeria is not particularly the safest place right now. Nobody wants to throw their words, you know, across the country for several reasons. So all of that come into play. People have been shouting, resign, resign, resign. Does that fix anything? I mean, it would be a good sign that, okay, because in any other country, that would be the case. Multiple people, because this is a huge deal. But Nigerians are like, okay, resigns, then what? The person that was still coming there, is the person better? You know, there's always devil's advocates for these things. Does that fix anything? And do you see, you know, this move by the registrar as a sign that JAMB might actually do better going forward?
Okay, so there are a lot of people that have faith in the registrar. He seems to be, I mean, I don't know him personally, but he seems to be someone a lot of people respect, and, you know, people have, you know, put their word for him. Like you've mentioned, in a lot of countries, people would have resigned. Even the service provider would know which company, you know, is handling it and what went wrong. And all of those things would have been in the public space. However, I believe that it is what we're doing to correct things that matter. It is the systems, you know, the institution, what we're putting forward in terms of, you know, how we're correcting it. The first thing JAMB needs to do is be more transparent. We need to understand what is going on.
I feel like Nigeria
because it's a high-stakes exam. They have a whole year to prepare for this exam. Every child's life is dependent on this exam. And it's really telling you, as a person, after I've gone to school for 12 years of my life, this is what would determine whether I can move forward or not. I mean, the best graduating student in Unilag last year that got a perfect 5.0 score, he's our ambassador in my organization. He wrote JAMB 3 times.
I think I saw that story.
So but, I mean, but what does that say? You know, so it's really, this is a high-stakes exam. We need the registrar to be more transparent. I mean, does he need to resign? It would have been great. I mean, you know, it has signs that it will show, but, you know, it's the correctional measures that matter now.
Thank you very much. I mean, there also whispers about class action suits. I don't know how many years that's going to take, considering how slow the judicial system here grinds. But, I mean, I think every option should be explored because this should not happen again. Thanks a lot, Mario. Thanks a lot, Tora, for being here today.
For having me.
And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir.
I really hope things work out for you.
Yes, sir.
We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Now, Friday the 16th was International Day of the Boy Child. If you didn't know that was the situation, you are not alone. A lot of people didn't know that. And it's probably going to inform our last conversation today about, you know, this talk about how boys and men are supposedly being forgotten in conversations and, you know, what that means for the future. I'm joined here now by Ayotunde Fabanwo, who's an entrepreneur and a filmmaker. Thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Ebuka.
Is that a fact, though, that the boy child has become relegated in these conversations? Because there's, you know, there's this running joke about how many Women's Day there are, how many Mother's Days there are, how many days of the girl child there are.
Yeah.
So it almost looks like the boy has become a pariah. Is that a fact?
Yes, I think it is a fact. We have unintentionally just sort of put the male child in the dark while we focused a lot on women issues and what women feel. And we forget that, you know, feelings, emotions is not gender-based. Anyone can feel any of those things. And yes, so it wasn't intentional, but yes, it is a fact that the male gender has been sort of put in the dark side, and that's why people make those subtle comments. You know how they say, like, from a little joke you can tell when someone is serious. I think that's what's been happening, and that was a way for men to sort of say we also want to be heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the fix for this, though? Because you find that this podcast culture now, there's become sort of a wave of sort of pro-masculine you know, podcasters.
Yeah.
A lot of people argue that it's gone too far right. You know, you have the Andrew Tates, you have the Joe Rogans,
Yeah.
who promote this sort of version of what a man should be, you know. And it borders sometimes even on just being completely toxic.
Yeah.
There's the argument that, well, you have to go that far so that people sort of pay attention and, you know, then find a balance. I don't know if that's a fact. But what's the fix for this? Are conversations helping? Are there even room? Is there even room for conversations? Because women will also tell you, yes, there's all of this celebration of women, but we're still far behind.
Yeah. So I think the first thing we need to do is to celebrate masculine emotions. I think that's the first thing. So when people come out to talk about how they feel, we shouldn't shame them, because that's one of the reasons why men wouldn't talk. So if as a guy you are being abused verbally or physically and you talk to your friends about it or your family, people would usually just, you know, put you aside and go, so it's not serious. Because right from a very young age, when you show a little bit of emotion as a boy, people say things like, you know, act like a man, no be man you be. All those subtle, you know, messages to say, oh, you have to be strong. And people forget that you can
But
be
shouldn't
strong.
a man be strong, though? So
Yes.
where do you find that balance?
Well, yeah, you can be
Because
strong and soft.
vulnerability is nice.
Yeah.
And you just wonder, where's the balance between being vulnerable and also, you know, not being, because it's indoctrinated, like you said, for so long
Yeah.
that you now want to, I don't know, is there even a need for balance?
I think
Shouldn't you just be vulnerable even? Like, I don't know what's the right way to do it.
Right. I think that there can be balance, so you can be strong and you can be soft. And that way you're able to be an emotionally available adult, which is which is lacking, you know, in today's culture. And that's why you realize that for men, it's even from subtle pictures that you see on the wall, when they want to draw a man, they would draw him with muscles and, you know, and six packs and all of that. And that's just a subtle message that says you have to be strong. But you can be strong, soft, emotionally available, and that just makes you a better human. And once you sort of are able to express yourself as a man, say, oh, this is how I feel, and just pretty much to say to men, you know, emotions are validated, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, you know, when you talk to a lot of guys, you find that a safe space is actually what doesn't exist a lot for men. You know, you talk to guys, they laugh at you.
Yeah.
This one, a weak guy. You don't also particularly want to maybe come across as weak to the women. So maybe that's also not. So is it men that need to change, you know, the way we think about what vulnerability means?
And I think it's everyone, really, because like you rightly said, even women expect that men have to be strong. If a woman, for example, wants to pick a box from the top of the shelf, she can do it with her own strength. But once there's a man around, she's like, oh yeah, please, could you just, you know, help me do that? And if you ask why, there's just a very basic answer, because you're a man, right? So let's have conversations around men and being emotionally available, having to validate their emotions. Or because I say, oh, I feel hurt, or I'm talking about being abused, doesn't necessarily mean I'm weak.
Yeah.
There are various other ways to show I'm strong. It doesn't have to be about just my presentation or my emotions.
Tell me about this film, Unheard.
Right, Unheard is a movie about Ugo, who was domestically abused by his wife, physically, verbally. And so it's really just a movie that's saying, you know what, even guys go through all of this, but it's okay to speak up and to pretty much tell people what you're going through. So at the end of the movie, Ugo actually sort of killed himself based off of all the other things that had happened. He tried to talk to his mom, tried to talk to his friends, but again, you know, no one's really listening to him. So at the end of the day, yeah. So that's.
Do you find that that's common, men who are abused? And I guess the second part of that is the culture of silence around that.
Yeah.
You know, people tell you that, you know, how do you even tell the police, my wife they beat me? You know, it's almost like, and that's also part of the problem. How does a man come out to say, I'm being abused at home?
Right.
You know, those conversations seem very, very hard. Or are they even that hard? Are we just making it hard?
I think we are just making it hard, to be honest. And does it happen? I think it happens more often than we would like to think. You would, look, so in the course of this short movie, we sort of, you know, had to research within, you know, so we spoke to 100 married men. And out of the 100 married men that we spoke to, 45 were verbally abused, almost on a daily basis. And then only about 10 admitted to be physically abused. And we feel the only reason why is because every other person didn't want to admit that they were being, you know, physically abused at home. So having a conversation, not just having a conversation around it, I think celebrating it is also, because when, as a guy, you see other guys who have spoken out being celebrated rather than shamed, it will give you more confidence to say, oh yeah, this is what I'm going through. And also we need women to join in the conversation as well, to allow the men in their lives be able to talk and express themselves.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the one thing I know that is a consensus amongst a lot of people is the fact that this sort of teaching has to start from the home, from when the boy is young, and, you know, so that they grow up with this being nurtured that way already. And it brings me back to the talk about balance, you know. On the one hand, yes, you want to raise a child who's sensitive enough, who's vulnerable, who understands, you know, just vulnerability and the fact that it's not necessarily weakness. But you also want to raise up a strong man who can survive, who can provide, and all those things that, you know, men, whether for good or bad, expected to do. Is that a possible thing, to raise a man who's strong and vulnerable?
Yes, it's very possible, and like you rightly said, from a very young age, it's necessary for parents and guardians, uncles and aunties, to sort of teach kids to be able to be strong, but at the same time also say to them, even as a guy, yeah, it's okay for you to cry, it's okay for you to show emotion, but remember that as a man as well, you can also be strong and soft at the same time. Because like I said earlier, what is really lacking is on emotionally available adults, which is really affecting a lot of the things. It's very subtle, but you can see it. Even in Lagos, for example, when you want to approach a guy to ask for directions, you have to first say, I beg, no vexo. Because either way, if you do something else, they just come at you with this, you know, mini aggression. And so it's subtle, but it's there. And I feel like it's a way for guys to say, we want to be heard, we want to be listened. Yes, we're strong and all of that, but we want to occasionally show emotion.
Yeah. Unheard is a short film, you said?
Yes, it is a short
film. What made you want to do it?
Right, so, you know, I run a male contest where we have like very macho guys, Mr. Ideal. And
that's a male pageant?
Yes, a male pageant. And in the course of the interviews, you realize that even those guys are looking all muscled and macho, they actually have a lot of emotions and baggage from when they were, you know, younger. And so we decided to do a research and figure out, okay, emotion, masculinity, how does it correlate? And one thing that topped that was domestic violence. People were verbally abused by their girlfriends, by their wives, and we wanted to sort of talk about that. And it was May, so May is Mental Health Month, and it was the perfect time to sort of screen the movie.
What do you hope this achieves?
Say that again?
What do you hope this achieves?
Conversations around domestic violence in men. People don't, even when we presented the short movie, people are like, do men go through all of that? And yes, they do. But people shy away from that fact. No one wants to touch it. And so we're hoping that, you know, we're pushing it out to film festivals in Nigeria and outside Nigeria as well. And we're hoping that people would kind of, you know, gradually start to see the African man as not just strong, but also someone that can be soft and emotionally available.
So if I want to see it now, I can't see it yet?
No, you can't.
You're still mising it?
Yeah, we're still mising it. Yes.
Thank you very much. Once again, the International Day of the Boy Child was on Friday the 16th. Happy International Day of the Boy Child to all the boys and men out there, especially those who have been sort of inculcated into this culture of silence. And we just hope that everybody finds a space that's safe enough for them to interact. Thanks a lot, Ayatunde, for being here today. And like I always say, you can follow the conversation on social media. Please use the hashtag #RubbinMinds when you send us the message. And I'll see you next Sunday. Really wanna get with you. Don't just stand